Hello, lovely people. Welcome to Ari Talks About Music. I'm Ari, and today I'll be reviewing the new Car Seat Headrest album, The Scholars. The Scholars is the 13th album from the American indie rock band Car Seat Headrest. And given that their last album, Making a Door Less Open, to be honest, was definitely a huge dip in quality compared to the two preceding albums, one of which being a fantastic re-recording of their 2011 album Twin Fantasy, and then of course the other one being my personal favourite of theirs, Teens of Denial. Around that time in their career, it really did feel like they were an absolutely unstoppable band given the insane consistency of the quality of their music. However, the release of Making a Door Less Open in 2020 definitely proved me wrong with that. However, one bad album is definitely not enough to ruin my expectations, and this album was still one that I was very excited to listen to. The opening track on this album, CCF I'm Gonna Stay With You, does take quite a while to get going, and during the intro you have this really strange, almost yodeling going on. However, eventually it does of course start to pick up, and becomes this very theatrical, almost glam rock song. And I think that as far as glam rock goes, this track is actually very repetitive, going on for 8 minutes, which for normal Car Seat Headrest standards is nothing too insane. However, on a normal Car Seat Headrest song of this length, there is usually a lot more going on, and I think that a lot of the glam elements of this track actually make it feel a lot cheesier as well, which I think generally is a genre that is very difficult to pull off in a tasteful way. Devereaux is a much more typical Car Seat Headrest song that is a lot less glamorous but still very theatrical, and I definitely much prefer everything about this track to the previous one, just with how much more of a standard indie rock track it is, which I think is what Car Seat Headrest generally do best. And it was definitely relieving to hear that this wasn't just going to be a full-on glam rock opera for the whole thing. Lady Gay approximately is a nice little Bob Dylan reference, and this track as a whole does feel very Bob Dylan inspired, with of course the much simpler folk instrumentation being pretty much just an acoustic guitar for the whole song. And I also love that just despite how calm and relaxed this song is, it still somehow manages to also be so anthemic, which again I think is a very typical feature of a lot of Bob Dylan's best work. The catastrophe, Good Luck With That Man, keeps the more folky theme going, still being a very simple and stripped back song, but is still much more upbeat than the previous one. And eventually the song does start to build and progresses a little bit, and then you have various elements of rock and post-punk that come in as well. I'm also a fan of the way this track starts to build towards the end, being quite a fun moment and very typical Car Seat Headrest. It's great to hear them trying new things, as while this is very typical of their sound, it's still not really quite like anything they've ever done before. And while it's still not quite as epic and as passionate as some of their previous work, it's just really good to hear them expanding their sound and trying new things. Equals, I think, is overall just a really messy track that really just doesn't know what it's trying to be. It's like it's trying to be super progressive and theatrical, but on the whole it's just not quite long enough for that type of song, and in the end just makes it feel super messy and underwhelming, which I think is quite frustrating because it could have been something quite good. Gethsemane is then the first of this album's 3 super long and progressive tracks, with this one starting very simple, very soft, and these really nice calm vocals as well, but then of course does start building pretty much just as you would expect it, slowly adding one layer at a time. Around the 3-minute mark is when it really starts to pick up as this epic guitar comes in, and then just takes over, becoming the prominent instrument for a little bit. After the quick rock section, it goes into various other movements, if you will, and most of which are just flowing in and out of each other really well, and there is just a great mix of calmer and much more relaxed moments, and very upbeat and very vibrant moments as well. Reality has this really beautiful intro that's very lo-fi and almost ambient and new age in a way, and while it does go on for a while, I actually really like it because it's just a nice change to have the much more organic and simple instrumentation. And as the track starts to build, I think the much more linear progression does make it feel a lot more impactful and very powerful when the guitar finally comes in. I then also love how it goes back to the much more simple and ambient sound, but this time with the addition of an acoustic guitar, which is also really relaxing. And then before the track ends, it does give you just one last build up, which I think does actually cut off quite abruptly, which is a shame, since it felt like it was really going to build towards something epic that it almost became, but it just ends a little bit too soon, I think. And then Planet Desperation is the 18-minute long epic that ends this run of 3 tracks, and does start off with this really strange intro, which to be honest I'm not entirely sure what is going on or what they're trying to go for, but luckily it does end pretty quickly, and eventually a much more progressive guitar riff comes in that really starts to get things going. It then progresses a little bit with an almost post-rock kind of style, with a big emphasis on the texture and the soundscapes of everything that's happening. And eventually, when it does reach its peak, there is just so much going on. It's so dynamic. It's really good. There are so many different guitar riffs and sound changes going on. And then towards the middle of the track, you have the very heartfelt acoustic break, which does go on for a while, and I absolutely love it. This being a very simple piano, and then of course Will's voice also being one of the best vocal moments on the whole album. And then going into the outro of the song, you have first off these very weird low-pitched vocals, which luckily are only there for a few seconds because I don't like them at all. But then after that just builds in a very typical Car Seat Headrest way and just ends the song definitely on a high note. And then finally True False Lover then ends the album, and to be honest, I think this is another one of those where it really just feels like a random song was tagged on the end for whatever reason, especially that this is just a very simple, very straightforward rock song, which coming off of the back of 3 much longer, much more progressive tracks doesn't sound all that good. As an individual track on its own, I still really like it, but it just doesn't do a very good job at ending the album, and I think really should have been a few songs earlier. And so on the whole, I think that this album, it can be a tad messy and is quite rough around the edges, but still definitely has its fair share of amazing and epic moments. I would say that it's still far from a full return to form given the absolutely outstanding quality of many of their previous albums, but they have absolutely significantly improved on their previous album, and I'm hoping that over the next few years they're definitely going to continue to improve once again, and maybe we can even expect some other albums almost on the same level as things like Teens of Denial. And so for now, I'm feeling a 6 out of 10 for this album. Thank you so much for watching this review. Please be sure to listen to this album yourself and tell me your thoughts below. Please leave a like if you liked the video, and please leave a dislike if you didn't like the video, and remember to stay hydrated.